Hey guys, today I'm going to be working to rebuild the top end on my 2010 KTM 300X CW. That's a two-stroke, obviously, and this one's going to be a little bit different. Well, the procedure is going to be completely the same, but what makes this bike a little bit different is that I'm using a Slavin's Mule Kit. And basically what that is a 2016, or it's a 2013 to 2016 cylinder, and all the computer and everything was changed out. And what that was supposed to do was bring the bike up to the 2013 to 2016 model range, to give it more torque, because the exhaust port on the cylinder was a little bit lower, which increased the length of the power stroke and gave you a little bit more torque and a little more performance. But other than that, this bike is completely stock, and you shouldn't see any differences in the way that you go about rebuilding a top end on one of these. So stay tuned and I'll show you how to do that. So these are all the parts you're going to need to do a top end rebuild on this bike. You have your cylinder base gaskets. These are all different thicknesses and allow you to combine them to create different thicknesses depending on what elevation you're riding at and the compression you want to run. Obviously you're going to need a new piston, a new wrist pin bearing, and piston rings. I recommend that you purchase these wrist pin clips that have little tabs on them. These allow you to install these clips with a pair of needle nose pliers, which is a lot easier than these stock clips, which basically you have to use a screwdriver, and it's a pain in the ass to get these in. You're going to need these copper crush washers. These are for the cylinder head, and they are form-fitting. They do create a seal, so you will need to replace these every time you pull off the cylinder head. You'll need the O-ring kit. This comes with the cylinder head O-rings and the power valve O-rings. And you're also going to need the power valve, the side cover gaskets as well. So that's all the parts you need to get this job done. For this job, you're going to need a variety of different tools. You're going to need sockets in 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, and 1/2 inch. You're going to need a Torx wrench. You're going to need a set of ratchets with the sockets or the extensions to go for those. You're going to need a 5mm Allen socket. You'll need pliers, both needle nose and regular pliers, 13mm wrenches, as well as a crescent wrench, a variety of different lengths and size flat-headed screwdrivers. You'll need a driver and these Torx bit sockets. You'll need a regular hammer, a dead blow hammer or a rubber hammer. For gasket cleaning, you're going to need wire brushes, X-Acto knives, and razor blades. Those are good to have. For lubricants, you're going to need this aluminum anti-seize for the head bolts. You'll need some thread locker. You'll need WD-40, gasket maker, and a whole lot of paper towels. Alright, so step one in this process is to drain the coolant out of the engine. So I'm going to do that now. And to do that, you just pull off this assembly here is the water pump, and then this bolt right underneath it is the one that you use to drain the coolant out. So I'm going to pull that plug out. And then in order to get it to flow out quickly, get this O-ring out of here, you're going to want to pull out the cap, the radiator cap. And that's going to allow that vacuum to release, and it's going to allow the coolant to flow out quickly. Alright, so that's down to a trickle now. I'm going to go ahead and put the bolt back in. coolant to the side. You can just go ahead and tighten this bolt back down. You're not going to need it for anything else after this. So just give that a good snug. So the next step is to remove this side power valve cover, and that's got 3 Torx bits size bolts in it. So you're just going to pull those out. And then this power valve side cover slides out from the bike. It comes up this way instead of lifting up. It's got some gasket maker on it from the last time I was in here. The reason is that there's this rubber boot that sits here, and it seats into the groove that's on this cover, so that's why it seats in, goes in directly, and comes back out. So just go ahead and set that to the side. And what you're going to want to do on this side here, you have to remove the connecting arm that connects to the power valve assembly. And it's got this little clip in it. So with that, you're going to need a screwdriver. And you can just pull, you can get the screwdriver on the back end of that clip, and it comes around here. Before I get too far ahead of myself, it's always a good idea to cover up this hole with a paper towel, because if that pin or if that clip falls into that hole, you're going to have a nightmare trying to get that thing out. So this pin slides out and down. So you can see here that little pin clips around that shaft and slides up inside it. So throw that in with the rest of the power valve cover stuff, and then this connecting arm, you can just pop off. It's just a friction fit, and then you can go ahead and remove the paper towel, and that will allow you to get to the bolt. There's 4 bolts that hold the cylinder in place, so you'll need to pull all 4 of those off at one point. You can also remove this breather tube. Pull that out of the way. That's stubborn. There we go. The next step in this process is to remove the starter so that you can get to the power valve side cover on the other side. To do that, well, stock you have 2 bolts here, but I'm missing one because that one was stripped out at one point. So I'm going to pull this one out. It's important before you do this to make sure that you disconnect the power from the positive side of the battery, because if you hit the terminal to the cylinder or to any other part of the bike, the frame, you'll wind up shorting out some of the electrical circuitry. So just make sure you disconnect the battery before you do that. And this, in order to get this out, it's going to slide straight back. It's a little stubborn. You can get in here with a screwdriver and kind of encourage it to move out. It's a little stubborn. You might even consider using a dead blow hammer to tap on it. But just set that out of the way. And then same on this side. Just go ahead and remove this side cover. You're going to have some of the oil left over from the two-stroke mix that builds up on this side. That's not a problem. You just need to put a paper towel under there to clean it up. But it's thick and gooey, so just be mindful of that. Alright. That's done. Now we need to remove the coolant lines. This whole assembly here needs to come off. You can pull off the spark plug wire. There we go. Set that up out of the way. So you just start backing out these hose clamps. And this whole assembly is going to come out. So there's one for this radiator. There's one on the other side for the other radiator. There's one that goes into the top, the head here. And then there's one that seats into the frame, where they come in from the top of the radiator. So just go ahead and remove all of these hose clamps. Just loosen them up all the way. I'm just gonna push in on this hose here. These might take a little encouraging to break loose. Sometimes you just shove a screwdriver in there and kind of pry up on the rubber, because after having been clamped down by the hose clamp for that long, they can sometimes get a little sticky. Alright, this whole assembly is going to pull out. Another feature of this bike is that my coolant temp sensor wire was broken off a long time ago and I haven't bothered to repair it. So in this case I'm just pulling the whole thing out, coolant temp sensor and all. So that actually makes it a little bit easier for this job anyways. Alright, so the coolant lines are out of the way now. The next step is to remove the upper motor mount. So once you've got all that removed, it's time to start taking off the cylinder head bolts and then the cylinder base bolts. That's those down here. There's 4 of these, so one on each corner of the cylinder. And then there's 6 of these cylinder head bolts. So you're just going to go ahead and something to keep in mind when you're loosening these up is that you want to loosen them in a star pattern and only about a quarter turn at a time. You don't want to take the risk of warping or distorting the cylinder head or the cylinder base, so it's always good to loosen these a little bit at a time. Generally the rule of thumb is to release or to unscrew them about a quarter turn all the way around and then go back through and do another rotation about a quarter turn all the way around, and then from there they should be loose enough you can just unscrew them from there. So once those are removed, you'll be able to pull off your cylinder head. These are usually stuck on there pretty good. You can use either a screwdriver or some sort of round object to get in here and just kind of pry it up a little bit. Something to keep in mind is that there are 2 dowel pins in here, and you just want to make sure you're keeping track of where those are at. So there's one here, and then there's this one right here, and both of those dowel pins are what makes your cylinder head line up straight. So just keep an eye on those, make sure they don't fall into the piston or into the engine. So you can just go ahead and leave this to the side for now. It's the same exact process, loosening the cylinder base bolts. These are studs. So just go ahead and loosen these about a 1/4 turn on each one in a star pattern. So corner to corner and then corner to corner again, and then go through again and do another 1/4 turn, and then you can go ahead and just unscrew them. That'll keep it from, it'll release the pressure as evenly as you can and keep anything from getting distorted at all. So the cylinder is completely unbolted. So from here, it should just lift right off. It's going to be a little bit stubborn. It's kind of stuck on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again take the dead blow hammer, and I'm going to tap it. Just kind of break it loose. Doesn't need too much encouraging. One thing is that if you don't have a pressure washer, like I don't, and you haven't had a great opportunity to really clean around where the cylinder base is, you'll want to make sure you don't get any dirt falling into the engine. So just make sure you are aware of that and trying to clean it at every opportunity as you get in here. There we go. All right. Little leftover coolant coming out here. Great. Yeah, so you can just go ahead and set the cylinder to the side for now. You don't need that. Clean that up later. I'm going to dab out coolant that's pooling up here on the exhaust side. Now what I want to do is I want to rotate the piston up to the top so that we can get to it here. So the next step is to pull out the piston. And in order to do that, there are 2 pins, or 2 clips rather, on either side of the wrist pin here that goes through the connecting rod. And you'll have to dig those clips out. So before you do that though, you'll want to put a rag in around the connecting rod in the so that the clips don't have the opportunity to fall down inside there, because once they're down into the base of the engine, it's just a nightmare to try to get those out. So with these clips, what you'll have, you have a groove here on this side, and there's one on the other side as well. And what you can do, small enough screwdriver. So you need a relatively small screwdriver for this, but you can get in here, and you can pry underneath that clip. On there. You'll be able to work that out all the way around. There we go. So there is the stock clip. And that is exactly why you want to be using those easy clips, because these things are a pain to dig out. They're even more of a pain to put in. So pull them out on both sides. Actually, if you can just slide out that wrist pin, you don't have to pull it out on this side. So just kind of see if you can do that. Doesn't look like it's gonna do me any favors today. So I'm gonna pull out the pin, or the clip, wrist pin clip on this side. Whoa. Okay. Well, that went flying off. Sometimes these wrist pins can be a bit of a pain to get out. One thing to do is you can take the 3/8 ratchet extension, which works nicely. It's about the same size as that wrist pin, and you can tap on it. Now what you want to do, you want to make sure is that as you're tapping on it, you're putting pressure on it from the other side, so that you're not putting any stress on the connecting rod and the connecting rod bearing that connects to the crankshaft. So push on it as you tap it gently, and it'll slide right through. Oh, okay. Well, that happened a little more abruptly than I was expecting, but no problem. Some things you can tell by looking at the piston. You can tell where it's wearing. So you can see that there's some wear marks here and here on both sides, and that's normal wear. It's nothing to be concerned about. You can also tell where there's blow-by, which is also here and where these dark spots are. And again, that's pretty normal. Factory recommendation is to, I think it's something absurd. It's like do your top end every like 40 hours or something like that, and that's to keep your engine pretty much running as if it was new, like it was the day you brought it off the showroom floor. As a rider, I am someone who definitely uses my equipment to its full potential. And in terms of the amount of time I run top end, I probably have 200, maybe 300 hours on this top end. And you can see that the wear on it is nominal. It's not that bad. I mean, you definitely do start seeing some decrease in performance just because the blow-by in the piston. But to spend, several $100s to rebuild the top end every single time every 40 hours or every 80 hours even would be excessive in my opinion. That's a lot, and from my purposes, I think that replacing the piston every 150 to 200 hours is an acceptable amount of time. Went a little long on this one, but as you can see, like the wear is really not that bad. Some things to check out while you're in here. So you can slide out the wrist pin bearing. You don't need that anymore, at least not if you have a replacement. You'll want to inspect the play, if there is any, in the connecting rod, and the connecting rod bearings to the crankshaft. You'll want to see it's normal for the connecting rod to have play from side to side, but what you don't want is for there to be play up and down. So you'll want to hold the connecting rod perfectly in the middle and move up and down with it. It's very hard to tell that there's any kind of play there. Again, you want it to seat perfectly in the center of its range of motion from side to side, and then you want to move it up and down to see if there's any kind of play there. And it doesn't feel like there is, so I think we're in good shape to just throw it back together. But if there is play in the connecting rod, you're basically looking at a judgment call of whether or not to replace the crankshaft and the connecting rod. You can run it, maybe it blows up on you, maybe it doesn't. In most cases, the connecting rod bearing will last for a really long time. I mean, doing a bottom end on these things isn't overly common. So, you know, it's just something to check out every time you're in there to make sure that there's no play. From here, the next step is to clean up the cylinder, clean up the base here, make sure that the gasket is completely removed from all the surfaces, clean up the cylinder, rebuild the power valve, clean that, and put in new O-rings, and then you can slap it back together. For now though, I'm going to leave a paper towel wrapped around the connecting rod so that dirt doesn't get in there as I work on the rest of the stuff. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions about this section of the job, you can put those in the comment section below. We'll get to that as soon as we can. This has been part 1 in a 3-part series on how to rebuild the top end on a KTM 300. The next section will be on how to service the power valve, and then after that, the third video will be how to put everything back together. So if you like these videos, you can view more of our content here. Also push that like button and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.